Kia ora, I'm Chris Nichol. Today I'll be talking to one of New Zealand's leading actresses. Ilona Rodgers has played literally hundreds of roles on television and the stage. A huge range of characters. But even though I know that, I can't help but think of Alona as that super bitch from the 80s television series Gloss.
I just want you to have Shut up! I don't want to hear from you, I don't want to hear from anyone. Not one single solitary member of the human race. You get that, Shelley?
Got that, Maxine?
Am I right?
I'm happy to say Ilona's nothing like Maxine. She grew up in Britain, where she became a Baha'i, a faith her parents had adopted in the 1950s.
My parents were that generation that went into the war as teenagers and came out as very old young people. And for both of them, it had affected them enormously. My stepfather had put all the battalions in place for Alamein, and my mother had lost every friend that she had, including her husband. So the aftermath of the war was a time for enormous readjustment philosophically, and they were people that were seekers before the Beatles, I might say. So they were into Rudolf Steiner, anthropops, Madame Blavatsky, Buddhism. They both ran big hotels. They'd been trained in Switzerland at the hotel school. They ran five-star hotels in London, in Park Lane, but eventually broke out and opened a health food shop in Reading, which was so ahead of its time.
Yes. People would have thought they were a bit...
Oh, definitely.
A bit crazy.
Witches, probably.
Oh, right.
And they were talking to weirdos. You know, anybody who was a vegetarian or homeopathic or anything like that were very strange people. And they just read avidly and eventually found a book on the Baha'i faith, quite by chance, and read it, both sitting in bed, drinking with their whiskies in their hand,
Right.
you know, reading about the Baha'i faith, and both said, this is what we've been looking for. I was absolutely horrified. I mean, I was at a frightfully English boarding school, you know, and the effect of my parents becoming Baha'is drove me to become terribly religious.
Right.
As an Anglican.
Right. Somewhere else.
As an Anglican, and I joined the choir, and I was very lucky because we had a priest at that school who, you know, at that time you sort of got confirmed automatically in Form 3A or something. And I said to him I didn't think that I should, really, because my parents were quite weird. And so he listened to my dilemma, and he suggested that what we should do at school is do comparative religion.
And that was fairly ahead of its time as well.
Very radical, because he really allowed me to have an open mind. And what was drawing me closer to the Baha'i faith was already on my own. I had realised that all these major religions spiritually were the same. And that is probably the basis of the Baha'i faith.
Right.
That there is only one God, which is unknowable, that all the major religions in the world come from this unknowable source. And the only way that they differ is on their social laws, which were according to the needs and exigencies of the people of that time.
Know for whom they stand.
So where does the Baha'i faith come from?
Well, the Baha'i faith stems from Islam. Chronologically, of course, it follows after the faith of Islam, so it's the youngest world religion. It's only 150 years old. And the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith was a Persian Iranian prince. And he had a forerunner, very like John the Baptist was to His Holiness Christ. So the Bab, who was a member of Muhammad's family, was a forerunner to Baha'u'llah. And the Bab had a ministry of 6 years, and he was eventually shot, and 35,000 of his followers were put to death, and one of those followers was Baha'u'llah. And for that, even though he was a prince and of a royal family, he was put into prison, and eventually thanks to the Russian embassy, he was exiled out of Iran and spent over 45 years, first in Baghdad, then Adrianople, and then in the prison city in Akka, which of course sits on the opposite side of the bay to Haifa in Israel.
So for Baha'is, who is God? How do you speak of God as
Baha'u'llah
unknowable?
defines God as unknowable. We are finite. This essence is infinite, and therefore a finite can never understand infinite. It is an essence that we are constantly moving towards. This essence, so loving its creation, it, her, his creation, whichever way you like to say, has sent messengers, teachers. So probably if we thought of a school, God is the headmaster of the school, and classes have teachers. So probably from a Baha'i perspective, Moses could have quite easily taught Buddhism, but his job was to teach the Israelites. So a Baha'i has to, in order to become a Baha'i, accept that all the major religions come from God, and that one systematically follows the other, that all their spiritual teachings are exactly the same.
There's obviously no tension then for you between the Anglo-Catholicism of your youth and your Baha'i understanding now.
And I still love to go back. There is a tension, it's my own. I do love the King James Bible.
Right.
And therefore I do not like the New Bible, and I love the Beatitudes.
Is that about language?
I think it's the actor in me, and certainly as a child, to go to Evensong and hear, you know, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart. I mean, beautiful. I find for me slightly, the modern Bible is a bit like Shakespeare without Shakespeare. And I love the words, and I think the words, you know, spiritual words are what touch the soul.
O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home.
What attracted me to the Baha'i faith was this thing of unity, that you know, Baha'u'llah's message was that whether mankind likes it or not, there will be world unity one day, because that's the plan of God. And you know, what we are witnessing at the moment is a mankind in a state of adolescence, that scientifically we have united the world already. Computers, you know, lasers, whatever, but mentally and spiritually we lag behind. And it's very interesting today, geneticists tell us that actually, even though our eyes are different or the skin colouring is different, we're actually all the same underneath. You know, and if we think of ourselves as spiritual in essence, then, you know, we actually have really no problems.
The unity becomes more apparent then.
Yes, yes. And it's very interesting. I mean, my family have lived in New Zealand since '67. I came here in '74. But, you know, you look at New Zealand and how we've changed. I mean, just the dynamic of Auckland now, 15% Asian community. It's fantastic.
Was it just an easy move into accepting yourself as part of the Baha'i faith, or was that a conscious decision, a time at which that particularly took place?
Well, of course it's gradual, but you know, it's so easy to be a shopper.
Yes.
It's very hard to make a commitment.
Sort of taste and test.
Because, man, you're going to be tested. And certainly for me, I always remember once, and I mean, you know, in the sort of 70s, who'd heard of the Baha'i faith, you know? So I'm having dinner with an actor friend of mine, with some friends of ours from Thames Television, and I've got a glass of wine in my hand, and this actor friend always liked dumping me in it. And he said, oh, Alona's a Baha'i, you know, knowing that they wouldn't have a clue what that was. And this girl who worked in documentaries at Thames Television, she said, oh, I didn't think Baha'is drank.
Right, right.
And I thought, yes.
So where am I with
Where
this?
am I with this? You know, I've got to make my mind up. And again, because the Baha'i faith follows after Islam, Baha'is don't drink, you know. But because there's no priesthood in the Baha'i faith, because you do your own reading and your own deepening, you know, you have to come to grips with those things yourself.
Right, one way or the other.
Yeah.
That all nations should become one in faith and all men as brothers, that the bonds of affection and unity between the sons of men should be strengthened.
There are very few don'ts in the Baha'i faith, but there are a lot of do's, probably, and one of them is the discipline of prayer.
Right.
Which I confess I will be grappling with for eternity. But I know God knows I love him. Her, it.
You became an actor.
Yes.
What led you down that track?
Well, you know, very funny, there's a lovely jazz composer in the Bay of Islands called Russ Garcia. And at my wedding to my darling husband, somebody said, "Isn't Ilona an actress?" And quick as a flash, he turned around and he said, "All women are actresses. It's just that Ilona gets paid for it." And I sort of think that's pretty true.
Nice, yes.
It was the desire to take people into the world of imagination. And it's very interesting because if you study ancient theatre, of course it's religious, you know. Come into my theatre and I will give you a spiritual experience. And certainly, you know, when I started in theatre, we taught people and we brought them into that world of their imagination. And for me, that's why I love live theatre.
Right.
Because people come into that house, the lights go down, and then my craft brings them into my world of imagination, and their imagination comes in too, and we mix, and wonderful things happen.
Yes.
And it's a gift.
Clearly you experienced a sense of privilege about that.
Oh, enormous privilege. But look, I've been the biggest bitch in New Zealand, and that
Yes.
was fun.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was such fun. Because I could go to work and be bitchy all day, and then come home and be terribly spiritual because I was exhausted.
So we're talking about gloss.
Yes.
I wanna tell the truth if you swallow a lie. I want the icing on the cake.
Bixie, it'll only be a few people.
No.
Look, you're cutting your own throat. You put money into my business. Do you mind?
This
It's in
is
your
an-
interest to see these people.
This is an engagement party, so if you want to entertain these shopkeepers...
They are fashion retailers.
Shopkeepers,
Are there tensions for you ever in the roles you get invited to play?
If it was a play that I looked at and thought that it was a play that was sensational for no reason at all, I would, and I'm lucky, say, hey, this isn't for me. And there have been times when I've done that. You know, I certainly love to be in plays where there is hope. And I mean, all the great Shakespeare tragedies, even when there are bodies all over the stage, there is hope, you know.
Yeah.
Thou, O God, our hope, with harmony and happiness.
You know, people will tell you, I'm not religious. But you say, well, are you spiritual? Oh, yes, I'm spiritual.
Interesting that. What do you make of that distinction? Because we come across that all the time.
Yes, I think people are very scared. Unfortunately, again, our newspapers tend to focus on the sensational. So we're looking at the sensational Shia, the sensational Sunni, and yet there are millions of Muslims leading very ordinary and devoted spiritual lives. But the newspapers aren't interested in those. But unfortunately, if you do listen to your radio, your television and your newspaper, you think that people who are religious live like that.
That's the stereotype.
It is. A Baha'i must pray at least one time a day. And that would be a prayer in private, preferably at dawn. And, you know, a bit of meditation. If you've been talking to God, maybe it would be a good thing to sit quietly and listen afterwards.
Millions of stars placed in the sky by one God.
At the local level,
Yeah.
the community meets for corporate prayer from time to time?
We have our own calendar, which is 19 days, 19 months of 19 days. And each month is an attribute, is a virtue. So a month of beauty, a month of patience, a month of honour, and the Sunday is the 19-day feast. The feast is a 3-part program. The first is devotional, and that has music and prayers and readings. And, you know, the more spiritual, the more beautiful it is, the better. This was a talk given by Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, on universal love in Paris, France, in 1911. Abdu'l-Baha said, "You are all very welcome, and I love you most dearly. Day and night I pray to heaven for you, that strength may be yours, and that one and all you may participate in the blessings of Baha'u'llah and enter into the kingdom." The second part is the business of that community. So the secretary of the local spiritual assembly will talk, the members there will talk about things that they think their assembly should be dealing with, and then the third part is the feast, which could be a biscuit and a cup of tea, or it could be huge.
Whole thing. We talked earlier about the key beliefs of Baha'i.
Yeah.
Are there other key principles?
Oh, yes. Now, if you think that Baha'u'llah declared his message in 1863, one of the first things he said was, men and women have equality.
Until women reach the same degrees as men, until she enjoys the same arena of activity.
Probably one of the reasons why Baha'is in Islamic countries are persecuted is that women sit on committees with men. Right. There would be universal language, universal weights and measures, universal economics. You know, now, you know, so many of these things we see happening automatically anyway. Probably shock horror, whether we like it or not, English is becoming the universal language. And, you know, what Baha'u'llah said was that there must be universal education. It is only by having universal education that, you know, that the pockets of mankind can come up. We can't go into third world countries and go, thou shalt have democracy, when they haven't even got education. That the rich will donate to the poor. You know, that United Nations is the best vehicle that we've got, and back it to the hilt. And obviously the Baha'i faith works extensively in the United Nations as an NGO, because it is you know, it's non-political, and therefore has a lot of social and economic projects all around the world. And the Baha'i faith is a world religion, and it has embraced people from all walks of all religions.
It's a world religion that's experienced quite a lot of persecution.
Enormous. At this moment, the Iranian Baha'is are not into schools. They're not allowed to go to school. They're not allowed to go to university. They aren't allowed to have jobs. They have become no people. And that's very hard. But they've been persecuted for years, right from the town of Baha'u'llah.
And this is because they're not proper Muslims in the eyes of the authorities?
Do you know, I would love to ask many Muslims what, and I'm sure many Muslims would say that the Baha'i faith is an ism of Islam. But in fact, the Egyptian court took the Baha'is to court many years ago and declared that the Baha'i faith was a separate religion.
Oh, I see.
That it was a total anathema to Islam, but it was separate, and it is separate.
So it has a status in its own right.
But you see, when you read the Baha'i writings, so much of the writings are Islamic. They're written in Arabic, you know, and so a Baha'i would have enormous understanding of Islam, because, of course, Baha'u'llah was a Muslim.
Right. Yes.
And so was, the Bab was of the family of Muhammad. You know, so the respect for Islam is enormous. The respect for Christianity is enormous.
I didn't even think they were ready now.
You've been married, did you say, did you have 30 years to a Baha'i?
30 years. Yes.
Always Baha'i, but...
Yeah, ironically, and it's not something, you know, that is advocated. You know, there is no thou shalt marry a Baha'i. Just so happened that I met Dave and you become a Baha'i.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Children?
Children? Not a Baha'i at the moment. You know, grew up as a Baha'i child, but that has the right to follow things himself and chooses not to be at the moment, loves his glass of wine.
Yes.
I think just at the moment he's in that shopping mode,
yes,
and doesn't want to put the glass of wine down and make a commitment.
Yeah. Well,
and good luck to him.
And the tasting and testing process is a rich
one. Exactly.
How does Baha'i equip people to deal with suffering?
I think it's a process that many of us go through, and basically it's you go through suffering and you have to learn to let go. And I think it's that letting go that actually is the lesson. Meeting people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and you see this man who has suffered so much, and he's let go, and you think, well, that's the lesson. And it's when you let go that you're given a vision of the bigger picture. Hey, heel.
So, Alona, what about death?
What about death? I think I've got a lovely quote that I put on my mother's grave, who died an untimely death, God bless her, of cancer. And it's a quote of Baha'u'llah's, and it is, "Why do you grieve when I have made death a messenger of joy for thee?" And, you know, it's our next stage of growth. And if it is a natural death, and of course there are unnatural deaths, children, tragic, you know, Saint Abdu'l-Baha says, even of children, if you think of that world of humanity, it's at that moment God has picked out that young plant and put it in another part of the garden. But you're all in the same garden, you know, and you're moving through to the next part of the garden.
Do we know anything about that other part of the garden?
Baha'u'llah talks about the fact that souls will recognise each other, you know, and that everybody moves on. It's an interesting thing. Baha'is do not believe in hell.
Right.
As the next stage, you know, that some people go into hell and damnation. And certainly, I'm sure you've experienced it too, many people create their own hells on earth. That actually probably, I think personally myself, my biggest, hardest bit is on the point of death. I'm going to be judging my own life. This is my own feeling. And I will see all the gifts that I was given and the ones I didn't use. And I'm sure that's going to be hell. But there is a moving on. And again, we will move on according to what we've achieved in this world spiritually. I think what attracted me to the Baha'i faith was the uniformity of it all, that I knew immediately that I could associate with anybody who had a religious belief, and I could go, yay, wonderful for you.
What's the sacred book of Christianity? Bible. The Bible. And the Bible has two parts. So what's the first part of the Bible?
Old Testament.
Yeah. And what's the second part?
The New Testament.
Yeah.
The Baha'i faith says that the greatest gift an individual has is to seek truth for themselves. And who am I to take that journey for them away? I can tell you about my religion, but it is not for me to make you a Baha'i. Right. I can introduce you to the Baha'i faith. But, you know, the journey of a soul is the greatest journey that each of us are on. The journey of the soul starts from the time that you are conceived in your mother's womb, and it goes on through all the worlds of God. I mean, as Jesus says, in my Father's house are many mansions, you know, and You know, from a Baha'i perspective, really, this physical world is purely to prepare you for your spiritual world. And therefore, you know, I'm thinking in the Bible where Jesus would say, let those that have ears, let them hear. You know, as a Baha'i, I would say, well, you know, this world is for developing your spiritual ears and your spiritual eyes. I think each one of us has our own story, and it's Pilgrim's Progress.
Right.
It's all in there, isn't it, you know? Milton wrote a wonderful book. And there are moments of doubt. There are moments of, I'm sure, you know, I just want to go off and be a hedonist and stuff all this, and that's part of the journey. And I think that's what gives you humanity. And I hope humour. I think humour is so important.
Sometimes a bit underrated in religion.
I'm thinking of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I was fortunate to be his MC when he came here. And, you know, he's always laughing.
But at least we Tibetan believe, you see, most of the weight is the sign of virtues. Yes. And also, you see, a sign of healthy.
That's right. You don't want you to take my shirt off.
Encourages us not to take ourselves too seriously, perhaps.
I think so. I hope so. Yes.
May you be as shining stars, bright and luminous forever in the kingdom. I counsel you that you study earnestly the teachings of Baha'u'llah, so that God, helping you, you may in deed and truth become Baha'is.
What Baha'u'llah's claim is, not that he is any better than any of the prophets gone before, but his job is to bring about that prophesied era. And he said whether mankind likes it or not. His teachings are for the oneness of God, the oneness of religion, and the oneness of humanity. And that, in fact, his teachings will go ere 1,000 years before a new manifestation of God comes, so he prophesies. But his teachings go beyond that, and what he is bringing in is the golden era. So, you know, what the Baha'i faith sees is mankind on a path of an ever-increasing civilization.
So, if you like, the kingdom of God will come on earth.
As it is in heaven.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.